Backstory, conflict, and intrigue. Oh my, let's talk about the new episode of Silo. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watch Our Pass, and it's Friday, which means it's Silo Day. We have another episode down in the bunker. This is Season 1, Episode 4, Truth, which is coming to Apple TV Plus on May 19, 2023. It directly follows the shocking events of Episode 3, which ended on kind of a cliffhanger. I mean, they always end on a cliffhanger, but this one ended on a big one. The mayor of the silo, the beloved mayor, collapsed and looked like she was poisoned. That was the end of Episode 3. We find out more in Episode 4. Well, she was probably poisoned. She's at least dead. And now we're dealing with the aftermath. We're dealing with the consequences of the mayor's choice and the investigation into her death. So should you keep exploring Silo? Should you keep staying on this journey? Well, my hot take is this episode is not as strong as the first three, but it's still a good episode. If I was going by my normal scale, I'd say you should probably rent this one, but you're probably going to watch it anyways because this is a good series and you're going to keep going. But this episode is not as impactful or as exciting as the last couple episodes. I mean, it's definitely a necessary one. It definitely explores some of the characters and has some important changes, but overall, this is not as strong as I think the first three episodes, which is not a big surprise because the first three episodes I thought were very good. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this episode, a few things I liked, a few things I didn't like, and go into a recap. So as you can imagine, there will be spoilers during the recap portion. If you don't want to know what happens in this episode, I would turn it off when I get to the spoiler section, but don't worry, before that, I'll keep it vague and I will let you know when I get to the spoilers. So in Silo Season 1, Episode 4, called Truth, you learn a lot more about two of the main characters. The main revelations are with Jules, the new mayor, and you get to find out more about her backstory and why she went from the upper levels of the silo to the lower levels of the silo and what the reasoning behind that was. You also find out more information about Marnes and kind of the effect that the mayor's death is having on. It is not a great response, but definitely shows how much he cared about her. And will this new pair of unlikely officers solve the mayor's death? Well, you'll have to watch to find out. So, things I liked about this episode. The first, Jules' background. It was a really well done kind of background story. I liked that they gave a lot of information into Jules' character and her background. It really did a nice job of interspersing like the flashbacks with the kind of the modern times, the current times. I liked that it generally related to what was happening with Jules. So it was nice to kind of like give you that information as it progressed the story. And it really did feel like a lot of necessary information. The second thing I liked, I can call it the conflict, I can call it the contrast. It is just nice to see like the very different personalities of Jules and Marnes. It makes for some very interesting scenes and some interesting interactions. They have very, very different styles, very, very different motivations, and that makes for some exciting and fun stuff to watch. And the last thing I liked is the intrigue. The silo is a lot about intrigue, a lot about the things that are going on in the silo, and you see that here where you still have some people who are advocating for different positions, even though the mayor has just died. They are still people trying to like pull the strings, twist the angles. They're trying to get what they want, and despite this big event, I like that they are still continuing to do that. So, that being said, things I didn't love as much. The first, this is a fairly slow episode. Now, Silo is not like a fast-paced series. It's not something that you go for excitement, but seems noticeably slower than the previous two episodes. It could be because the revelations weren't as big. It could be because maybe this is more background and less so much about what's happening now. But for some reason, this is just not as exciting of an episode as we've seen in the past. I'm sure it'll pick up. I will keep watching anyways, but this is definitely an episode that you're going to have to really pay attention to keep your interest. And the second thing I didn't love is this really feels like a background episode. Now, I did like that because it gives you some background, but it also means that there's not a ton of big revelations. There's not a ton of big moments. This really feels like it is a necessary step. It is one that fills in some of the blanks and fleshes out some of the characters, but not one that is like independently exciting. It is definitely something that will be a jumping off point for later episodes and lets you kind of like get into the rest of the series. But on its own, this feels like an episode that is more of a necessary step rather than a big impactful one. So that is Silo Season 1, Episode 4. Like I said, on my scale, it would be a rental. But you'll probably watch this anyways. If you're this far into Silo, you're going to keep watching because it's a pretty good series. And despite this being not a great episode, it's still a good episode. So I'm going to go into the recap and have those spoilers. So if you don't want to know what happens in this episode, I would turn it off now. Go check it out. It's on Apple TV Plus. Go watch it and then come back and hear my thoughts and let me know what you think. So, but just know that there will be spoilers from here on out. So the big backstory in this episode is you get more information about Jules and her character and what caused her to go down to the lower levels of the silo. It appears that she had a little brother named Jacob, and both her brother Jacob and her mother died, or I think maybe her brother died and then her mother left. Something happened that caused them to leave the family. So it was just her and her dad. Her dad was a busy doctor. He was working all the time, and that left a lot on Jules's plate. So she had to do some very kind of grown-up things when she was young. She had to like clean out her mother and brother's stuff and take them down to recycling. She had to take care of herself because her dad was working long hours. She had a lot on her plate that you really wouldn't want to put on a child that young. And so this caused her to eventually just leave and go down to the lower levels. I think she wanted to be away from the memories, away from the things that remind her of her family. And she just wanted to be busy. She explained later that like when she was down the levels, she was so busy that she didn't have time to think about Jacob or her mom because she was just so busy, and she was so exhausted that at the end of the day, she would just fall asleep and then like wake up and do it again. And that rhythm, that routine, that like constant exhaustion made it so she didn't have to think about the things that were hurting her up in the upper levels. So that was one of the reasons she went down. And she was also good. She's good at the mechanical work. She liked kind of working with her hands. And so that was another motivator for her to stay down there. And on top of that backstory, Jules starts her term as sheriff. And it is a bumpy start. It seems like I don't know, like office administrator, office assistant doesn't really like her that much. I think she is a little bit maybe prejudiced about Jules coming from the lower levels. She has a line in there about like she had to stock the fridge, but she didn't know what they ate down there. Probably the same thing that they eat up top, maybe just not as fancy. But Jules is also a very different personality from Holston, the outgoing sheriff, and so that is a big clash. Like Holston seemed to be more kind of nice, seemed to be more kind of open. Jules is more of a closed book and not super nice. I mean, she's effective, she gets the job done, but she is not like a small talk person. She's not like a super nice person. She's not a warm person, and that seems to cause some friction. It'll probably get resolved eventually, but right now, her and the kind of like person who runs the sheriff office, they're not very happy with each other. But Jules gets right to work. She has a new case. She has to investigate the mayor's death. And she also has her own personal interest in trying to figure out what happened to George. George is the person that kind of like discovered some files from the before times. And he was having a relationship with Jules. And he ended up killing himself, although Jules doesn't think that that was the case, and neither does the previous sheriff. So Jules kind of jumps back in and tries to investigate George's death while also investigating the mayor's. But that is not helped by one of the other deputies, Marnes, who is kind of going on a rampage. He really wants to solve the mayor's death also. He is turning to some rougher tactics, some tactics that maybe aren't going to help that much, but he is just so distraught. He's so filled with grief that he's just trying to get answers in any way, shape, or form. So when Jules sees this, she comes up, she offers him a kind of compromise. She will help, if he helps her solve George's death, she will help him figure out the mayor. So hopefully, even though they have very different styles, they can at least help each other out and work with each other and try to solve both of these deaths rather than both of them going out on their own and possibly failing. So it's a nice arrangement. I'm really looking forward to seeing kind of like Marnes and Jules's different personalities, because they are very, very different, and it's nice to kind of see those contrasting styles. Now, while Marnes is also trying to investigate this, like I mentioned, there is still some intrigue, and I did like that, like, while this was happening, Sims, who's played by Common, came down and like checked on him and also tried to like push forth the sheriff character that he was trying to get put in place. This guy named Billingsley. He tries to get Billingsley kind of installed. There's a judge that's going to sign off on it. He tries to like get Marnes' support, and Marnes like, no, like Jules was Holstrom's choice. Let's like see what happens. And Sims still tries to kind of keep the narrative, and Sims still tries to keep pushing this. I like that they are still trying to do this intrigue, even though all of these big events have happened. It's kind of like fits with the different kind of factions that were butting heads at the start of the season, and I imagine they will be continuing to do this throughout. So while Jules is like investigating the mayor's death and also investigating George's, she comes across this character named Lucas, who is just like in the dining room. He's looking out in the window, and he comes to introduce himself, and it's a very kind of awkward scene because he seems to be like trying to make small talk with her, and she just is having none of it. I'm not sure if they're like going to try to set up this as a relationship later on, or if this is, or if Lucas is, I assume Lucas is going to play a big role because he introduced himself. We just don't know what his role will be yet. I think maybe he might be a future love interest for Jules. That's just kind of the impression I got, but we'll find out as this season progresses. That leads to the last couple scenes of this episode where you have some pretty big revelations. So we'll start with the Marnes side. Marnes is in his apartment and he gets attacked by someone who I guess presumably doesn't want to see the mayor's case solved. But what you also find out in this episode is that Marnes seems to have some enemies that have gathered over time. And so sometimes there's speculation that Marnes is going to get himself hurt because people just don't like him. But this feels like it's probably something related to the investigation of the sheriff. Maybe they don't want him to keep digging because he's on the right track. He did get like a list of all of his potential enemies that could have tried to harm him because he didn't think anyone would try to harm the mayor. He thinks that maybe the poison was like directed at him and it unfortunately hit the mayor and not him. So it's possible that this is someone that is interested in like taking him out. I think this is probably a plot against the mayor, just kind of like from the intrigue that we've seen. It feels like people were trying to like push the mayor in one way and she was going a different way. And this seems like maybe they were going to take that ultimate next step to try to like really push their agenda. I kind of see that with the fact that that Sims is still trying to push forth their candidate Billings rather than just accept what the mayor did. But you don't know, and Marnes gets attacked in his apartment, and they struggle. The person has a shotgun. He pulls back, aims a shotgun, and you see his face. Now, I didn't recognize his face. Maybe I just am bad with faces, but I didn't recognize him. I wasn't sure if we were supposed to be impactful or not. The person didn't say their name. The Marnes didn't say their name. I assume we will find out next episode who this person was, but you see who they were. You don't hear Marnes get shot. You don't see Marnes get shot. So I assume he's still going to be around next episode, but I guess we'll find out. Now, on the Jules side, she was messing with like the air conditioning or the heat in her apartment, and there was this like clicking sound, and she liked it. It helped her to sleep because I think it reminded her of the lower levels, which is a little bit more, there's a little more noise, a little louder down there. But she sees that it is like this like string with like a washer at the end of it, and it's like hitting against the vent. It's causing a little bit of noise, and so she opens it up, pulls the string out, and that string is attached to some sort of file. So she pulls the file out, opens it up, and it's George's file. George, her ex-lover, George, who was like suicided. It seems like Holston was looking into George's case, secured the file, and made sure it didn't disappear. So you're not clear like why it was hidden, because you would think the file would just be easy to pull. It seems like maybe Holston thought that the file could disappear, and so he wanted to secure it and make sure that Jules got it. And it's possible there's also notes in there. You didn't get to see much of the file, but maybe there's some notes in there about the investigation. Maybe there's some notes about what he discovered. You don't know that either. Those are the two kind of like big cliffhanger revelations: the revealing of the person who was attacking Marnes, and the fact that Holston had this George Wilkins file. That's the big reveal. That's the big kind of like cliffhanger end of Silo. And so I guess we'll have to find out next week. So this is Silo Season 1, Episode 4, Truth. It comes to Apple TV Plus on May 19, 2023. I don't think it's as strong of an episode as the other ones, but it's definitely one you're going to have to check out just because it seems like it is foundational for the rest of this series. So thanks so much for watching. If you liked this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. And again, let me know what you think. Let me know what I got right. Let me know what I got wrong. Let me know what you think is going to happen in the rest of the season. We'll all find out together, but I am excited to see where it goes. So thank you.